Hello. Today I am going to demonstrate how to center a small lump of clay on the wheel. For demonstration purposes and just life purposes in general, I throw left-handed. My predominant hand is my left hand, and my wheel spins clockwise. So most of the action is going to happen for me in the 6 to 9 o'clock quarter of the clock on my wheel head. I'm going to start with a wedged lump of clay. This is about a pound, maybe a little bit under a pound. And the first thing I do is start with a clean wheel head. You can get it a little bit damp, but you don't want it to be soaking wet because the clay will just slip right off. Pat the bottom of your lump of clay so that it has a nice convex, rounded shape to adhere to the wheel head. And if you have trouble getting it right into the center of the wheel head, you can either do a two-handed splat down, or if you want to do it one-handed, which is what I normally do, I put my non-dominant hand right around the area that I want to put my clay into, and it gives me a more precise area to stare at when I'm blapping my clay down. Now, before we really get going, we're just going to start at a really slow speed and using a downward and inward, almost karate chop motion. With my elbows pinned against my stomach, I'm just adhering that convex, rounded ball of clay down to the wheel head to form a seal. And then the last thing I'm going to do before I really go up to speed is get my finger wet and just kind of draw a circle, really smearing that in there. It's going to do two things. It's going to help enforce that seal so that the clay doesn't want to come up off the wheel head as easily. And it's also taking away a little bit of the excess that's out of center. Everything you do right now, early on, before you get the wheel up to speed, will make centering it a more effortless process. So while the wheel is still spinning slowly, we can just kind of, and now instead of doing the downward chopping motion, we're going to do a down and in pat, like you're patting the ears of a fluffy dog at the same time. And make sure that your elbows are locked into your body, because the more stable your center and your core is while you're touching the clay, the more centered and stable the core of the clay will be. If your elbows are here and you're slapping all over the place, you're smacking it out of center all over. If your elbows are locked into your sides and you're patting down, there's really only one direction and one way this clay is going to move, and that's in. And you can see it's also moving up because I'm pushing in and I'm pushing downward. The clay has to go somewhere. And after it's gone in and downward as far as it can, it's going to start coming back up towards the center of the clay. Now that this is a pretty good starting point. I'm going to get my hands wet, but I'm not going to I'm not dumping water onto my clay. I might take just a little finger scoop and just kind of drizzle it on and just make contact with the surface of the clay and get it all wet. Give that a moment because the clay is going to absorb some of this water, and then you're going to do it one more time. And now we want to start forming our mound. When the clay is moving fast, it's very easy to knock your hands off center because your hands are not very stable things. They have a lot of flexibility and motion in them, which means they're more wibbly wobbly at high speed. So in order to make sure that our clay is really going in where we want it to, we have to do what we can to give ourselves an advantage over this little 1 pound lump of clay that wants to throw us all over the place. So we're going to start with our elbows pushed in, locked into our sides. We are scooched all the way up to the wheel head. There is no space between my lap and the wheel. I've got both legs pushing in to stabilize my seat. My elbows are locked into my sides or kind of into my hip area or the edges of my stomach, wherever's most comfortable to you, but pretty much into the center of your core. We're going to get this wet a little bit again. Before we put our hands on here, we're going to lock our hands together too. We're going to give ourselves a little bit of a butterfly here. Locking our thumbs in is going to give us more downward strength and pressure, and we can push in with our hands at the same time that we're pushing down with our thumbs, and we're going to push down with our thumbs and squeeze in with our hands, and we're just going to try to, we're just making a mud pie on the center of the wheel. And I find that the best pressing for me happens here in the ball of my thumb rather than up here. So I'm pushing down here when I push in. And my fingers are almost completely on the wheel head. You can see that one motion really brought a lot into center, but you can also see that it has a bit of a wobble. If it wobbles at all, it's not centered. But that's okay because that gives us a chance to practice coning up into a volcano. So now we're going to take that same butterfly shape and we're going to, instead of pushing down with our thumbs and reining things in with the edges of our palms, we're going to squeeze in with our palms and our fingertips. It's almost like kind of like a little throttling motion here. We're going to squeeze in this area with our hands. And we're going to squeeze that right up into the ball of our thumb. And if we're doing it properly, we're going to start catching some slip. This slip is really great. I try to put as much of this back onto my clay surface as I can. Add a little bit more water if I need. Clean up this edge down at the bottom where the clay is meeting the wheel head. And we're going to squeeze in with our fingers. And that's going to draw that clay up, 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 up. We don't really want that. So we can push that back down, 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 down. When we get too much clay on our hands, we can just put it on the edge of the bucket. It's still pretty good, but you can see that there's still quite a bit of wobble down here. This spot's centered. This is not. So we're going to go down, down, down again. And we're going to lift up and off of the wheel head and off of the clay very slowly. Because if you do that and you rip your hands away really quickly, that little bit of pull on your clay is going to pull it back off center. And then you have to start over again. If you want to smooth down the top, you can just kind of use the meaty edge of your hand. We're just about where I want to be for a centered lump of clay. Anytime I touch my clay, there's 3 things I need to keep in mind. Is it lubricated? Because if it's not lubricated, it's sticky, and if it's sticky, it's going to drag and pull itself out of alignment. Are my hands stabilized? Am I just jabbing at the clay because I want to poke at it, or am I using slow, considered movements when I touch the clay? And what am I doing to stabilize the hands that are moving this clay around? I would call that centered. So we can clean this up a little bit. Something you want to consider before you are finished centering your clay is how wide your puck is going to be, because the width of the puck and the height of the puck is going to determine the width and height of your final shape. If you have a very tall, narrow puck, you're probably going to be pulling your walls up very high and probably into a vase-like shape, or maybe a tall beer stein. This is not enough clay to make a tall vase. A very wide, low puck could be a pasta dish or a plate of some kind, or maybe a shallow bowl. Something in the center. This is kind of one of my favorite sizes and shapes of pucks to make, because this can make a really nice full-bottomed mug with a curvy shape. Or I can make it into a bowl, like a ramen bowl. Or I could make it into a soup mug. And if I wanted to go down and a little bit wider, I could make a plate. So I think this is where I'm going to stop with this. Thanks for watching. Me.